Welcome to Bat Therapy, the psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness. We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown, and comic enthusiast and nerd aficionado Keaton Hopkins. This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. All right, so today we are doing Marvel again. We're really sorry.
We're not sorry, okay?
No, it's
y'all,
true. We're not right.
y'all listen to those too, and we really appreciate it. And I need to be better at sharing, and so we're gonna do Marvel, but it is actually an interesting character. We're exploring the Punisher universe, which I've always appreciated the Punisher universe because there's not TikTok dances or fart jokes, or it's gritty.
Blood and gore and death.
Okay, yeah, there's that too. There's that, but also gritty. That's the good way. That's the good way of saying something's dark, right? Like, it's gritty, which is, it's funny because the only two times you use those words, it's like either you're talking about a movie or a book, like, man, that was gritty, or you're talking about the feeling of sandpaper.
I was about to say, or you're talking about sand that got in your sandwich at the beach.
Right. Like, oh. That's what's wrong with the Punisher. He's just too gritty. But we're talking about Dr. Krista Dumont.
Yes. So this is season 2 of the Punisher TV show that we're specifically focusing in on. And Dr. Krista Dumont is a psychologist. So
Yes.
they a lot of times throw in tons of psychiatrists, it seems like. But this time it's a psychologist. I was able to creepily zoom in and squint really hard at my giant TV in the living room to look at some of what she had on her walls. So it looked like, well, she had a bachelor in neurobiology, which was very specific for a bachelor's, but go you.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I've never heard of that being like an undergrad degree.
Me neither. And it was her organization of her degrees was kind of weird because above that was her fellow in psychology, which would be at the end of her training. And I couldn't see what her other certificates were. But if she did a fellowship in psychology, it means she went to grad school and did internship and completed her psychology graduate school stuff. So We have a psychologist with this one.
Is there another field she could have gone into with that bachelor's degree?
Oh, yeah, there's tons of stuff she could have gone into.
Okay. That just seems extremely specific for a bachelor's degree. Like, I did I majored in biology, and I came out knowing a lot about photosynthesis, but I also knew a lot about cell biology. I also knew a lot about anatomy. Like, it hit all the little corners, and then you do your master's where you specialize, and then you realize you don't know anything at all.
That's where you would expect you'd think the bachelor's would be a little less specific. Who knows? People, people write these things and they do silly stuff. At least they came out with psychology in the end, which does make sense with what her character does and whatnot. So it was nice to see another psychologist, albeit one that once again sleeps with her client.
Okay,
same old story.
That is just one issue.
Oh yeah, that's just one issue.
And her character, which by the way, if you want to, you can watch this. Punisher's now, it's not on Netflix anymore. It's on Disney Plus, which is fantastic. Because in my mind, all I can see is like the Punisher skull with like Mickey Mouse ears on it. Like I want that on a t-shirt because that's the reality now. Like, yeah, so when Disney officially got all their stuff back, now Deadpool's on Disney Plus. Logan, all the hardcore comic book movies are up there, and it's like, oh man, you know what? I feel like watching Blade right after I finish up 101 Dalmatians. It's a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. Good times on Disney Plus these days. Yes. So I love the skull with the Mickey Mouse ears. It's a great visual.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's yeah, there are many situations. Okay, let's just say this is not an ethical situation going on, and it's once again, the same old plot line of, yeah, we're going to have the therapist sleep with their client because we just kind of keep playing the same old tune. But there's actually a lot of cool stuff that goes on with her character, and she's the therapist for Billy Russo, who's kind of turning into Jigsaw, and he had a traumatic brain injury, which traumatic brain injuries have there's a huge range of what can happen with these, but based on what they describe, it's a severe traumatic brain injury. He was incapacitated, had to relearn how to do a lot of different things in life. Versus you can have actually mild to moderate TBIs, you recuperate within a few weeks to a few months, and you don't have memory issues and other things that continue to come up later on. But for him, there's a lot of that stuff that can continue, and he's got some emotion regulation stuff that's going on. There's a lot happening. So she works with him in the hospital for a number of months. And then, as it always goes, he then escapes, finds her at her place, and she says, "Yeah, I'm not going to call anybody. I'll just help you out here."
Yeah, it was one of the things they did really differently in this TV show, how they did Billy Russo, because in the comics, Billy Russo was like a hitman for the mob, and then the Punisher fights him, throws him through a glass window, and his face gets all messed up. But in this, he was a soldier with
Yeah.
Frank, and like he ended up being the one responsible for his family getting killed, and Frank like runs his face over like broken glass. It's really brutal in that first
Yeah.
season, and I'm like, man, I can't wait to see his messed up face in this second season. And then they show it, and I'm like, oh, he's still just a hot dude with some cool scars
Yeah.
now. But
So
whatever.
so instead of being a hot dude, now you're a hot dude who has scars on his face.
Even hotter.
That was I struggle with that a little bit because, okay, here's the thing. If you ended up with scars, even if you were still good looking, I'm sure that you would still zoom in on that and it would be hard to manage. But the way that he
Absolutely.
has trouble processing it, and the way that he wears a mask over his face for months, doesn't let anybody see him, and this, that, and the other, you expect a lot more disfigurement, and I apologize for those out there who have been through this sort of thing. If that's not the verbiage you prefer, I apologize. But you expected more damage, and I was actually kind of disappointed because it felt like the Hollywood, we're going to kind of pretend that we're pulling for this but not truly delve in, which to
Yeah.
me is kind of insulting to people who actually have had that level of damage happen to them, because oh, heaven forbid it shows up on the television.
Right. We can't have her hooking up with someone disfigured, right? We're not really disfigured. That's what it felt like. It
Yeah,
felt
it
it
did.
felt
It did
really
feel
weird,
that way.
especially knowing Jigsaw from the comics. Like Jigsaw from the
Mm,
comics is terrifying. Like honestly, he kind of looks like. Did you ever see the Child's Play movies, the Chucky doll in the later movies where he had the
ugh,
stitches on his face and stuff? Jigsaw looks terrifying. Sometimes
yeah.
half his eyes hanging out of his head, and so I was disappointed with how they did him here. So, didn't she give him the mask?
I couldn't figure that out. So what I could figure out was that there's they go they kind of go through space and time a little funky at times. So you start off with seeing him in this mask that has this cool artistic kind of look to it, and it's got some patriotic colors on the sides and stuff. And then later you find out that she worked with him and talked about, with trauma, what can be helpful is a lot of times having the patient or the client depict on there what they would like the world to see on a mask for themselves. And I've also heard of, you have a poster or you create a shield for yourself, or this is actually something that a number of therapists do with folks. I don't know if she gave him the mask. And I don't know how I feel about the fact that he was wearing the mask for so many months. I'm not. I mean, on the one hand, if that's the only way that he could be willing to fully connect with people, I understand, meet people where they're at. But it seemed like this huge barrier that was there for this whole time. So I don't know if she's the one that gave it to him.
So I think she is, just because he
Okay.
was basically strapped down and arrested. And I know that while she was trying to start treating him to deal with the trauma, she helped him by, I think, giving him the mask, which was that brings me honestly to my first question for you. One of the things I was wondering, because that seems like such an interesting thing to do, and I wonder if other therapists looking at that would be like, yes, that's the perfect thing to do, or if other ones would say, nope, I would have never done that. Because it's I guess the thing that's interesting about therapy is when you're dealing with people's minds, you can approach it any way you want to. Like, it's not
Yeah.
like a
Well,
broken
within reason.
it's
Yeah.
but it's not like a broken arm, right? A broken arm is like that arm is broken right there. But the mind is so much more difficult. I mean, it is a maze with valleys and roads that need
Mm-hmm.
to be fixed. Like
Well, and
there's
also the question of, is this something that needs fixing, or is this a societal, we see this as different, but it's not technically wrong
that's
or
wow.
broken?
See, yeah, that's another good point. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
no one's gonna argue about if that guy's arm is broken or not. Like, no, it is
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Mm-hmm.
broken. But like approaching him, I feel like if you put 30 different therapists in a room, how many different approaches would you have? Is there a wrong? I know there's plenty of wrong ways to do it, but at what point does someone step in and be like, this is the right way to do it, right?
Mm.
Like, how's the protocol?
Yeah. So this is where the research comes in, and there's actually a little bit of conflict within therapy at this time, where some people are worried that the art of it has gone away and been replaced with too much structure. And so let me kind of describe this. So we started with really helping people process and build insight and really exploring the psyche. And then we've had a lot of research happen. And research is not perfect. That's why the information changes over time that scientists and physicians, et cetera, provide to the public. It changes over time because research, none of this can be perfect, but it's essentially a way of trying to standardize things to see, okay, if we went this approach versus this other approach versus no approach at all, for example, what comes out on top? Who seems to improve the most? Or is there no difference at all? And so these are the ways that we've come up with a number of different protocols that can be useful. The tricky part being is you can't, I would argue, even with, say, surgery or setting an arm, there's still a skill set to it. You're not going to get it exactly the same every time, but the variability within the actual physical contact with the treatment probably has less variability than when you're doing talking treatments with someone, or you're doing things that interact that have to do with how you think, how you feel, how you behave. It's a lot more complex. So even within this, it can be kind of hard. So all this is to say, she does a lot of stuff that I see common threads that the people I know who specialize in trauma would say, yeah, I'm on board. I had a little bit more of a question mark in terms of her rehabilitation psychology side. So rehabilitation psychology is more the medical framework that you would expect based on the fact that he had this severe TBI. He's trying to be able to function well again, and just the processes with that.
You said TBI?
Traumatic brain injury.
Okay.
So when it comes to the rehabilitation side, it was a little less clear. Like, someone's coming at her saying he's faking. He's faking the fact that he can't remember things.
Yeah, Madonna, gosh, she was pressing that hard. Yes.
Here's the thing. You have a guy who has that history, who's probably under lock and key, given the criminal side of things, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Right.
they'd be doing memory testing on this guy. They'd be doing a lot of different assessments to see his scope. And there would be what we call validity tests within that to look at what's his level of motivation seem like. Does it seem like he's actually trying to remember, trying to improve, versus is this something where he might be hiding something, or there's something getting in the way that you wouldn't expect if it was a purely physical healing process. So there are certain kind of things from the more cognitive end that I'm not sure what she did, because she kind of deflected those questions, which, to be fair, the person asking her wasn't on his healthcare team, so it was none of the business. But her trauma side, I would say, was actually pretty good. She was trying to get him to process his nightmares. She was trying to help him manage his emotions better. My question mark with the mask is sometimes what's difficult is, how do you help someone take a step toward healing versus do it what we call a safety behavior, which is
Okay.
you have a safety blanket kind of thing, where a kid has a safety blanket, but at a certain point, it doesn't make sense to have the blanket anymore. And you have to make sure the kid can move on from that point. So it's the same kind of thing where with safety behaviors, you have to be careful. So let's say someone doesn't feel safe leaving their home, so they always go with a friend that they have.
Okay.
That's not sustainable over time.
Right.
That friend can't always be with you. So we have to kind of be careful with, okay, what is something that's helping me move toward healing? Was the mask to help him be able to connect in a way where he was too shut down otherwise, and it was a step toward growth? Or did it actually delay his process of being able to take in his new face, essentially? That's the question I don't really know the answer to.
That's a good point. And then the thing is too is, and this is another level, when I was going back to what I was talking about, the variability here, when you're dealing with the mind, not
Mm-hmm.
only are you dealing with what you do know, you're also dealing with a whole lot of what you don't know. Like,
Yeah.
what are they repressing? What is actually the lost memories they have?
Mm.
What is it that they're keeping from you? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
going back medically, it's like if an x-ray would reveal just about everything. An x-ray, MRI, right? You're going to reveal everything
However,
physically, right?
however, however, even we oversimplify and overly black and white the physical side.
Right.
An X-ray tells you a lot. It doesn't tell you that person's experience of pain, for example.
Right.
So one of the things that happens with this, unfortunately, is medically we actually see that women are not given adequate pain management, particularly women of color, a lot of times. And it has to do with the fact that certain things you can't just screen for, even when it's medical. That experience of pain or the experience of the injury, even when it's something supposedly purely physical, there's still this psychological, more complex component to it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is true. So yeah, I will backtrack there. But yeah, the thing is, like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, how does someone even begin when someone's dealing with memory loss? Like, I feel like
Mm.
that's a whole nother level of is there another level of professional that has to be brought in when it comes to memory
Mm.
loss? Because I mean, she did have a bachelor's in neurobiology, so
Hey, that would help. That would help.
there we go.
Understanding. Here's the thing. So it definitely helps to have some background in these sorts of things. There's a lot of places that could be coming from. So the way I kind of see it, and I was kind of talking related to this earlier, is when you have someone who's had a severe traumatic brain injury or something like this, a lot of times you do have specialists. They're usually in neuropsychology or medical psychology that work within the hospital system, work within the healthcare systems usually. And their focus is helping people to be able to manage the physical medical issues. So helping with, okay, how can I think about this? How can I process through it? But also, how can I adjust things in day-to-day life to either help with healing or help with management of what's going on. Like there's cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain, for example. There's rehabilitation psychology, like I was mentioning before, which works within kind of a lot of these areas, very similar to what he would probably need. Someone who literally couldn't leave his bed for a number of months and had to relearn so many things. So a specialization in that or neuropsychology where you have a good understanding of the brain can be helpful. But the thing to understand is that memory loss can come from a lot of different places, or not remembering can come from a lot of different places. So, for example, she hits a lot on repression with him and not remembering. And I think even in her notebook, you get kind of this flash of it at one point.
Yeah.
And she says she's not really sure where the memory issues are coming from. Is it the physical injuries? Is it the trauma that's happened? And so psychological trauma and repression, and probably honestly, it might be a combination of both. And also some of the memory issues they kind of hint at him having in the present. So there's one point he asks for Advil or something for a headache, and she gets him some and he takes it. And then a few minutes later, he asks for it as if it never happened. So it could be a brain injury, which I'm not so sure that's what necessarily was going on there, because he doesn't seem to have that consistently happening, and you'd expect it to kind of be more consistent that he's having trouble with retaining that information over time. It can also happen with just really intense emotional situations. You struggle to remember things. It's kind of like how when you're stressed and running around and you're trying to race to your car, that's when you can't find your keys.
Right.
Because all that emotional elevation, it can actually impact your memory, your ability to pull memories out, but also to create new memories because you're so elevated. You're just so feeling so intensely. And so that there definitely seemed to be a piece of that with him too. So a lot of trauma experts would be able to work within that piece.
Gotcha. And honestly, she is definitely a trauma expert. You know, I feel really bad because I was rooting for her. Like I was
too,
really,
actually.
really rooting for her because you get her backstory, which is of course filled with trauma, and she more or less she became a therapist combat what she grew up in and what she dealt with, but she got too close to the sun, because I know that she had one quote in there, because there was a story about how she found a bird and it was injured and the dad was like, it's not going to make it, why even try? And she proved him wrong and got the bird back to health, and then it flew away a week later. And one of her quotes in it, she said, given enough care and love, even the most lost cause can thrive.
So that was super eerie for me.
Yes.
Because I also had something growing up where I got literally the lost cause came up. As you know, I grew up in a fairly religious background, did a lot of Christian retreats and mission trips and this, that, and the other. And I was on a mission trip, and we were in another part of the United States. And we were going around and talking to people about Christianity, and also just, trying to give a person-forward representation of the religion versus, a lot of times there can be kind of that traditional stuff, and just trying to talk to people person to person. And me and a few people, we went and we were talking to these other teenagers around our same age, and all of our other group was waiting for us. And the minister actually pulled us aside and said, hey, we should really go. These folks are a lost cause. And it irked me so much to hear someone, especially in that position, to call people a lost cause. It stuck in my head all these years. And when she said that, I was like, oh my God.
Like, what did in a church setting, what does that mean? Like, they're just going to hell. Like, is that what they were saying?
I don't know.
Oh
I don't know.
God.
But that's
that's
the thing, right?
horrible.
It is, and at the same time, people do, and I don't think these kids were on any level near what Billy Russo was,
They
for
were
the
probably
record.
listening to
They were,
Blink 182 and eating Doritos after midnight.
yeah, they're probably smoking weed. They weren't murdering people.
Right.
Uh, so there,
Lost cause. Oh God.
but that's the thing is yeah, that I think that might be a common thread with a lot of us. I guess is just that pull to help where other people see a lost cause.
But I'm not gonna lie. As soon as she said that line, though, I was like, oh. Oh boy. Like, I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, and what does that name tag say? Does that say Harleen Quinzel? Does it? Let me take a look. Because as soon as she said, I'm like, I like this is because in my mind I'm thinking about comic book Jigsaw. I'm not thinking
Mm.
about this Marvel TV show Jigsaw. Like, oh, maybe he can be redeemed. I'm thinking, nope, he can't be. This is gonna go really, really
It's
bad. And she says several quotes like that because I like
yeah.
made sure because there's another. She's like, if we can't find the best in others, how can we hope to find it in ourselves? And I'm like, this sounds great on a poster.
It does. One of the things though in this show that kind of irked me about her character and Russo's character, who turns into Jigsaw, is they talk out of both sides of their mouths quite a bit. So she says all this about Russo, and then I mean, at this point, she's in love with him and she's all enmeshed. And this is why having these other relationships interwoven with your client is not a good idea. She shifts away from that because whenever she talks about the Punisher, she doesn't want to see him as someone who can be redeemed because that gets in the way of Billy Russo moving on. He says the only way he's going to move on is if he can get true revenge on this guy. And so she has to do a lot of twists and turns to kind of talk through both sides of her mouth
Yeah.
when it comes to some of this. But yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is that I've worked with people who've killed people. I've worked with a number of people who have killed people in war, not in war, meaning to, not meaning to. I've worked with people who have done other things that people might see as worse or,
Right.
there's, and I'm not going to go into details here because I also don't want to accidentally trigger people or anything or, divulge stuff, but life is ugly. And, one of the most complicated things though is I've yet to meet a person who's just purely bad, who has only done bad shit, who doesn't
Right.
care at all about anyone. I know some people are in a different kind of setting and they might see people that verge toward that edge more, but honestly, for most of us, even these people that we see as really, really terrible on the screen, there's a lot of gray. And I think
Yeah.
they're doing a better job in movies and TV with showing that nowadays.
And they did a good job with that too because you can tell she does deeply care about Billy Russo, but at the same time it's like this is where you're stepping out of line. Like
Yeah.
when she helps him escape, like that's when she doesn't scream and alert the guards or anything like that.
Woman should have hit that panic button.
Right, because the first time I feel like she should have known that, oh, this is a serious issue is when he's yelling at her and the two cops come in and he beats the hell out of them.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, it's like, okay, just remember you are like you're working with someone that is dangerous. Like it kind of reminds me
Mm-hmm.
of how those stories where people adopt big cats for pets and it's like, look, it's my pet lion. And it's like, yeah, it's like, yep, I raised it from a kitty and
Yep.
it's my pet lion and it'll never hurt me. And everyone else is looking like, yeah, that's a lion.
Don't take my dreams from me, Keaton.
And then, right. I mean, Simba was great. Simba was great. Why
I
was he
love
great?
that line.
Because he ate bugs. They completely shifted his diet away from human meat, right? But every time there's always people in the corner like, yeah, that's a lion, and that's gonna go bad. That's what went through my head when I watched this. She's like, oh, he can be helped. I'm gonna save him. Everyone can be saved, and then you just see him beat the hell out of these cops, and it's
You know
like,
what went through my
oh.
head? And actually, I think I wrote a note to myself. Let's see. She was calm with his aggression, and I was impressed with the fact that she essentially was trying to do de-escalation with him, where if someone meets you with aggression, if you meet them with that level of aggression or higher, then a lot of times their emotions are already getting real ramped up. So they're going to edge up and just it'll keep going up and up and up and up.
Do police
Versus
know this?
they do. The different police have different levels of training, but there is some mental health crisis training and whatnot. But it's tricky though, because they have a different role than she has,
Right.
and it's tough because their main priority is the safety there, and they have different tools, and sometimes those tools are necessary, but sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out, okay, when do those tools maybe amp someone up even higher?
Right.
Versus, and so that's potentially why she wasn't necessarily hurt
Yeah.
like the police. She didn't have she wasn't amping him up in that same way.
And she also, if I remember, she asked them, she told them she was fine. She's like, don't come in. Like, I think she even
Yeah.
tries to say, like, no, everything's cool here, but no, it's
And
not.
it's tricky. These situations are very complicated. But I was impressed with her approach with things, and agree with her that he was getting triggered by a lot of things going on. He wasn't trying to actively harm her or even the police. It seemed like it was just happening.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is when your emotions get to a certain heightened point, the frontal lobe, where your higher order thinking, your problem solving, your essentially humanness happens, it's shut off.
Yeah.
That's not where the activity is going on. It's all those parts of your brain that are just fight or flight and get through the situation, survive what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was trying to kind of bring him down from that, which is probably why she said, hey, give us space, give us room.
Right. And he just kind of did what a soldier does, and it kind of just kicked in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I really hated it, because like watching her story, I loved everything she was doing. I'm like, man, this chick's a badass. She really knows her stuff. She had a superhero origin story. Like she's like, I'm gonna fight the good fight after all this bad stuff that happened to me. And it just
and then they ruined it with having her sleep with him.
Yeah. And the thing is, I hated it just because I feel like they got to the point where they're like, okay, we got to make him a criminal again. What do we do with her? Let's have her sleep with him. I'm like, but she seemed too professional to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it.
I felt like she did it right. She was doing it cool. She was making the right steps. She wasn't afraid of him. He was making progress. And then it was like, actually, he escaped and she helped him. And now she's like just worried about his safety. She's so worried. Oh, and now they're sleeping together. And now she's attacking an agent.
Yeah. Even if they had and that last episode with her, all of a sudden she turned stupid. But anyway, she was so
I'm rolling
smart.
my eyes, everyone that's listening.
It was a big ol' eye roll too. Yeah. She all of a sudden got stupid and made herself super obvious. It was weird. But yeah, even if they had done the ethically questionable, unethical stuff of, okay, he escapes, she helps him, she doesn't turn him in. I could have bought all that, and you could still see her as, okay, this wonderful therapist who is questioning the lines of legality and ethics because what might be help this person heal the most. And that was so much more intriguing of a concept than, oh wait, she's doing it because she loves him and he reminds her of her dad. It's like, come on. But aside from all that, I do want to strike the chord of, I totally agree. I love that they showed, we've talked about this in a past, at least one past episode. They showed a flawed therapist. They showed
Yeah.
someone who had her own mental health struggles and things that she still struggled with. She could barely approach windows. She get this like vertigo thing going on, and it
Yeah.
seemed like panic stuff happening due to her own trauma. And I loved that because actually one of my passion areas is the fact that honestly, within my own field, we're pretty terrible at supporting our own people training in mental health to help others. We're bad at supporting each other in our mental health. We say, oh, no. The mental health issues are for the client, for the patient. And we forget that, hey, a lot of us actually are drawn toward this because we understand it.
Right.
And I loved seeing that with her.
Well, it's got to be difficult for you too, because at what moment are you not working, right? Like at what moment, like are you like, okay, I'm off the clock? It's like, but your specialty's dealing with the mind and mental health and therapy, and it it ends up kicking in every relationship, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
sure there have been days where you have gone into a restaurant and got bad service or got talked to rudely or something, and something probably went through your head like, I wonder what's going on with them, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like it just
Or I think, man, you're a jackass.
right. Like a mechanic walks away from a car and he's off work.
Mm.
But your specialty and what anyone that deals with the human mind, like I feel like it never actually stops. Like you're always kind of on duty, even in personal relationships. And I kind of understand what you mean though when you talk about like therapists not getting the mental health support that they need. And honestly, I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the times it's because someone that isn't a therapist looks at you and it's like, that's the goal, right? Like, man, that's the goal, to have my mind figured out and have it all together. And it reminds me of I was talking to a friend of mine, and she asked me, she said, is there such a thing as good mental health, or is it
Mm.
something that you just try to attain? And
Mm.
I was like, that's a really good point. I said, because in my mind, good mental health is just simply the awareness of it.
Mm.
Like being aware, like, oh, I'm emotional right now. This is
Mm-hmm.
temporary. This will pass. But she said that it seemed like an unattainable goal for her because in her mind, there is no
Mm.
such thing as perfect mental health.
I don't know if there is such a thing as perfect mental health. I think it depends what your goal is. So yeah, it's tricky because we have all the time people come in and they say, I want this stuff to go away. And certain sometimes maybe we can make certain things go away. But if let's say it's something like anxiety. Okay, well, let's take all your anxiety away. Well, I mean, then, you're hiking and a bear jumps out in front of you and
I'm fine.
yeah, that's not going to turn out too well for you
Give me
unless
5.
yeah. So, it's tricky. We we're not meant to always feel pleasant. Our bodies aren't made that way because they need to respond to the environments we're in and be able to help us through. And you're right. I agree with you that it's a lot of it is about understanding and trying to know where that's coming from and help yourself manage your own reactions. Because, yeah, I think even healthy people just have their things that they get stuck on. And I think there are I was just going to say healthy. I think there are lucky people out there who just have less of that stuff come up for themselves. So, we run the gamut in terms of just how much each person might be dealing with. But yeah, I think reaching for perfect mental health, I'm 100% with your friend. That that just seems like setting yourself up for failure.
Right. There's really no such thing. That's why I said that my definition of perfect or good mental health is just being very self-aware. Like just
Yeah.
knowing that, oh, I just experienced a period of psychosis and now
Mhm.
I'm recovering from it and now I'm gonna
Yep.
practice my mindful nerd moment that I learned from bat
There you
therapy.
go.
And like in my mind that is what good mental
Yeah.
health is.
Cuz imagine, let's take that example. Imagine someone saying, "For me to achieve success with my mental health, I never experienced that psychosis again." Well, you can't control everything about your brain,
Right.
and you can't control everything about your environment, and things happen. And so, yeah, I just hate seeing it when not only is someone having to deal with all the stuff that's going on around them that's out of their control, but then you can inadvertently end up beating your own self up for those things, which then just kind of makes it all harder to get through. So, yeah, I like that, where it's okay, it's not so much what I go through means success or failure. I hate the word failure, but it's more how I respond to everything.
Yeah, I like that. Do we have a mindful nerd moment?
Let's do it. Okay, so here's the cool thing about today's mindful nerd moment.
Ooh.
Dr. Dumont made this super easy for me. So, in season 2 of The Punisher, she's working with Billy Russo, and as we've been talking about, hopefully you've been listening. And so, when it comes to some of the times that his emotions are starting to overwhelm him, he's having more trouble. She talks to him about finding 5 blue things and listing out 5 blue things that he can see. And she actually like goes around and, at points kind of like lifts it up or whatever. So I thought our mindful nerd moment could be imagining ourselves as Billy Russo / Jigsaw, working with Dr. Dumont, getting overwhelmed, and practicing the 5 blue things. All right. So, as we always do, I'll have you just sit comfortably, straight but not stiff. And if you're comfortable with it, closing your eyes. If not, just softening your gaze, not looking at anything in particular. And at first, I want you to just focus on your breath. Don't worry about breathing any way in particular. We're just focusing on the inhale and the exhale as a way to focus in before we start our mindful nerd moment. And I want you to picture that you're Billy Russo. You're sitting with Dr. Dumont. Let's say this is in the hospital. So before a lot of this other stuff happens. So you're in this hospital room with Dr. Dumont and you're just getting really overwhelmed. You all have been talking about the nightmares you've been having. You don't like talking about it. You can't remember more than you've already said. She's asking you to keep repeating yourself and you're getting flustered and frustrated and just things are amping up. And Dr. Dumont says, "Tell me about 5 blue things in this room. What are 5 blue things that you see?" So in your mind, I want you to imagine you're Billy Russo, and I want you to pick out your first item, your first blue thing. And when you do so, Dr. Dumont goes over to that blue item and touches it to help you focus on that first blue thing. Now you go to the second blue thing. And when you list that second blue thing, she walks over, she motions to it to help you focus on that second blue thing. Now you focus on a third blue thing. Now a fourth blue thing. And finally, a fifth blue thing. Dr. Dumont thanks you for pointing out those 5 blue things. And you sit there for a moment just noticing how you feel now versus how you felt before looking at the 5 blue things. before we stop this mindful moment, as Billy Russo, as best you can, in this moment, congratulate yourself because this was a tough moment. And even the seemingly simple things are hard in these tough moments. You found the 5 blue things. And when you're ready, shift back to focusing on your breath. Take in first a few breaths as Billy Russo. Just pretend you're still in that hospital room for a few breaths, breathing in and out. And then shift yourself, your mind, and your body back to where you are as you listen to this podcast. You're back to you. Breathing in the space that you're sitting now and exhaling as well. And when you're ready, opening your eyes to finish the podcast. So what did you think of Dr. Dumont's 5 blue things?
So I did the exercise based on my surroundings, and
Nice, yeah.
I had to be careful not to get distracted just because like I'm in my man cave, if you will,
Yep.
and there's
Your
just
bat
really
cave.
cool things, right? Like my 5 blue things, like one was the Triceratops on my Megazord, one was Optimus Prime, one was the DVD case of my Smallville box set.
Nice.
One was a logo of the Carolina Panthers. They really need a lot of help. And then the fifth one was my one of my Gundam model kits that I
Love it.
built, and I'm like, man, those are really cool blue things. Like it was,
Yeah.
I kind of just like, man, my life rules. Like that's how.
Hey,
that's where I
look,
went
here's
with
the thing. So people, when I work with folks, I always talk about aim for fun and funky. Don't do the exercise just to do the exercise and keep it bland and boring.
Right.
Find the things that make you smile, that make you go, hey, my life's pretty awesome here.
Yeah.
The things that'll draw you in. Yeah, a lot of times those are the things that work. The things that are unique to you, your quirks that kind of draw you in, make you giggle. That stuff's perfect.
Yeah. But I also thought about like how good that would be if I was in a place that I was unfamiliar with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would, yeah, it's just I feel like this might be one of them I might overthink a little bit. Like I go out in the forest and I'm like, find 5 green things. I'm like, really? Did I really just do that? Like, did I like? Let's change it to gold so I can completely lose until it hits fall, right? Like,
I mean, it's true. Not every exercise, not every skill is going to work in every setting.
but I really like this one. Like, this is one you could do with your toddlers.
Yes. Well, and here's the thing. So sometimes people will say, oh, that seems kind of easy or simple, or sometimes things seem like it's for a kid. But guess what? When we're doing things for kids, we're simplifying it.
Right.
We're keeping it simple, something that's easier to focus on. And we all have moments that we just don't have the bandwidth. We're too hyped up, we're too amped up, and you need something simple. So yeah, and absolutely, this sort of stuff works great for kids too.
Nice. Thanks for nerding out with us.
I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown. Find me on social media at Crafting the Mind.
And I'm comic enthusiast and professional nerd Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JBS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. See you next week, same bat time, same bat channel.